Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And I agree, the community is such a dynamic place to be in terms of not only asking questions and getting great answers, but also to inspire each other, to connect with each other, and to really build that sense of community, which is so important, both in the education space, but also in the other markets that we work in all over the world. It's a great place to join, and if you haven't, I'd echo Nicole's sentiment. It's something I would encourage you doing. So folks, there is no PowerPoint here for my talk today. I just wanted to share a few thoughts with you and to really spark more of a conversation. I really like the fact that, we only have 35 people in the conversation here today so far. It might grow a little bit, but the goal with this event was actually to make it more of a dialogue, to make sure that we're hearing your ideas, making sure that we're aligning around what we're trying to accomplish as a company with your needs for the future, and hopefully to inspire you with a few ideas along the way. Now, what I wanted to talk to you about is really three key things, and then hopefully wrap with a conversation around how we can strengthen our partnership. But the three things I wanted to talk about were around the future of skills, or what we think of as the future of work and future of learning. I also wanted to talk about the impact of the pandemic, not just on D2L, but on all of us. And then the third topic that I want to share is some of the work that I've been doing with the Industry Strategy Council in Canada as we remap out the restart, the recovery, and the reimagining of our economy to the benefit of Canadians. And Nicole, you mentioned the problem that I was tackling, which was what's the most important problem that I could solve that would have the biggest impact on the world. That was literally the question I was asking myself as I was walking across the University of Waterloo campus, and I noticed there's a few folks from Waterloo here today. And I couldn't think of anything bigger than transforming the way the world learns, because learning has this natural ability to have this ripple effect. It transforms lives. It ripples from one member of the family to the next. It ripples through our communities. And it really does have an opportunity for us to have an impact on such other bigger problems that we as a society and as a country or as a community are trying to solve. And in the early days of D2L, it was really just trying to knock down every barrier that we could to really go off and tackle those challenges, to providing every student, now everybody, the best possible learning experiences so they could achieve more with their lives. And that's still true today, 21 years later. And it's amazing how far we've come, but I also still feel like we're just getting warmed up on this journey, and there's so much more to do. So we did an exercise now more than a couple of years ago on mapping out what was that future looking like? What is that future? If we looked out to 2030, what's the future of work? What's the future of learning? And we put out a series of white papers on the future of work and learning. And those can be found, I don't know if you want to pull it up, Nicole, while I'm talking, but if you go to our website, d2l.com/future of work, there's a series of white papers. We even partnered with some of our academic community, including CICAN here in Canada, to localize it to Canada, and also to make sure that we had it both in French and English. We've expanded that series recently with a new piece on lifelong learning, or what we refer to as learning integrated life. And I'll share a few insights from that here as well as we go along. But at the heart of all of those white papers is really just breaking apart that future, understanding some of the big macro trends, and then what can we do as educators to really be able to embrace the change that's underway. So, it dives into, and there's great sessions here coming up after mine, so I won't talk about it like I was going to talk about it, but around like micro-credentialing and prior learning assessment and new strategies around that, or continuous and stackable learning opportunities so that folks can learn when they can in a more flexible model. There's also a lot of conversation around skills and competency-based education, or what we often refer to in Ontario as around outcomes-based learning, and how those things start to weave together to really provide a better foundation for that lifelong learning experience after you graduate from university. And in the early days, I thought the spot where, you're going to laugh at this now, I thought the spot where I should focus was just purely on education, because clearly if we can have as big of an impact there as we can, it sets people up for life. we're starting to recognize now that the job of education isn't over after they graduate with an undergrad degree. We need to do more. Our responsibility is much broader now, and we need to think about how do we actually weave the world of work and the world of learning together in a more meaningful way. So you'll see great pieces in here on different work around work integrated learning. So I'm on the board for the Business Higher Education Roundtable in Canada, and we've mapped out 9 different types of work integrated learning experiences, and certainly a big supporter of the SWIP program that was just launched to help us ensure that more students get a better learning experience, or the Student Comeback Challenge. I don't know if you want to pull up that too, Nicole. That'd be another good resource to pull up. It's off the Business Higher Education Roundtable website on the Student Comeback Challenge. But there again, just trying to find ways to connect students to those broader opportunities, help them find mentors, work on interesting, challenging problems that help set themselves up for that transition from university or college into to the workforce. We then expanded out this work in terms of really focusing in on upskilling and reskilling in particular. And you're going to hear me talk about this here again in a minute. But upskilling and reskilling we saw as a huge challenge that was looming by 2030, where automation and digitization and technology was coming into the workforce. And that was going to truly transform a lot of jobs and displace a lot of jobs. But at the same time, the upskilling part of this is it also creates a whole range of new opportunities for folks and new fields that we never even contemplated that long ago. And so, yeah, there we go. Thanks, Nicole. So, if you have not pointed your students to this comeback challenge, I would encourage you to do so. It closes actually next week on the 18th of October. And this is a really good program that the government has put on. And again, each of you are supporting it indirectly. And I would encourage you to get more of your students signed up for these different challenges to support an opportunity for them to learn, but also an opportunity for us to solve some really tough challenges that we're facing right now during the pandemic. I think it's a great opportunity. And again, maybe Nicole will share in the chat the URLs for these 2 different resources. But it's more than just upskilling and reskilling. It's also creating a new mindset for learners, that when they graduate from university or college, they're not done learning. They have to have that mindset of, I'm going to be a learner for life. And so how do we actually start to wrap all of these things together with that person at the center, but all these different resources, whether it's the micro or stackable credentialing or skills, competency-based learning, prior learning assessments, all of these different initiatives that each of you are pursuing right now. How do we wrap that around in person so that throughout their life, as they move from one career to another, or as they look at the one step that they're in today and get to the next step, as educators, you're there helping provide that next helping hand forward, if you will, pulling them up to that next opportunity that they're going to need. And it's that integration of that whole system together that's such a critical piece. So those white papers, if you can't tell, are really important. They're not the traditional piece that gets put out by a company. They've been worked on very closely with a lot of academic partners to really make sure that we're doing our best to map that future. And we've also put out this summer a number of different policy briefs too on hybrid as a path forward for the fall. Clearly, we're already into the fall, so if you're not already hybrid, many folks are finding their way to that model at some point here this fall. And the interesting thing is we put that out thinking that's what life would look like in 2030. And then the pandemic hit, which is really my second topic. And, we now, at least in my opinion, a lot of the things that we see in those white papers, I feel have been pulled forward forward in time, if you will. And if we could provide solutions that met the 2030 vision today, there would be a market for it today. So what does that mean? It means now that every institution is now pivoted to online, the top universities and colleges are now figuring out, well, how do I pull ahead and really embrace the future a lot faster, because the world needs us to do that. And so I think the implementation plan for those different initiatives is now a 1 year, possibly 2 year, and if you want to be a leader, a 1 to 2 year time frame. It's not it's not a 10-year time frame anymore. And if there's things that we can do to help each of your colleges and universities embrace this vision, we're here and willing to talk with all your leadership, anybody, to make sure that we're getting across the urgency attached to this. And I'll talk a little bit about this from the perspective of the pandemic, from the perspective of the D2L first, and then I'll get into a little bit broader perspective of what does the pandemic's impact on the world and on Canada, in Canada as well too. And so we saw early indicators of the pandemic emerging, if you will, when it wasn't technically a pandemic. We had clients in Australia that in January timeframe were mentioning to us, we want to pivot over 4,000 of our courses from face-to-face to online next week. Can you help us? And we said, sure. Those were monumental projects that got kicked off really early that were quite a surprise. And we had to dig in a little bit deeper to understand, well, what's causing this? And in their particular case, they were closing their borders to Chinese students coming back to Australia to finish their education. And then we saw that ripple around the world. So whether it was conversations in Australia or Spain or other client locations that we have globally, it became very apparent that nobody was really sure how to deal with this emerging, what's now called a pandemic. And so we decided, as crazy as it sounds, back in January, February timeframe, to start leaning into the storm, not realizing at that time, or even having a lot of fears that we weren't sure how our clients would actually manage their way through it. But we felt, it was our responsibility to lean into it. And we started hiring February 1st into the areas that we thought would be a priority. And we started making tough decisions like canceling events like Fusion, which was not an easy decision, by the way, especially in February timeframe, to say, okay, well, we've got to start, making that transition to online as quickly as possible and start putting all of our resources that would normally be going into all these different areas and putting them on the front lines of this battle that we're going to be facing, the storm that we're going to be facing down. And in February, I made a crazy prediction at the time, and people actually called me crazy. I said, there's a chance, this is before a single school or before a single university in North America actually shut down. I said, there's a chance that a billion students around the world will be out of school. And I turned out to be wrong. It was about 1.6 billion. And there were about, from the numbers from the UN, it's about 2.4 billion people have had their jobs impacted because of the pandemic. So this was no small impact. And you learn a lot about who you are, and a lot about your people, and a lot about the company as you lean into something like that. So how nimble you are, how to accelerate roadmaps, how to eliminate bottlenecks in terms of things that are getting in the way of being able to support or grow. And then how to make sure that you're pivoting your resources and your strategy to make sure that you're leaning into the most important problems that you can solve that would have the biggest impact. And in our case, we prioritize employees first. And I know that's going to sound strange because we're known as a very client-centric company, but we felt if we didn't make sure that our employees were well looked after, then our clients are definitely not going to be well looked after. So we want to make sure our employees were looked after. We wanted to make sure that our supply chain, reserving as much infrastructure as we could, laptops, you name it, leaned into that quickly, and then made sure that we reached out to our customers to figure out how we could help. So those were some of the key pillars that we leveraged as we went into this. And we're still seeing a lot of clients still in that crisis response mode, right? Where, as many folks pivoted to fully online overnight, it was largely what we're doing right now, Zoom meetings or other technologies that were being embraced to do a sort of a synchronous session, replace what was going on in the classroom with a synchronous version of the same thing. And we all know that's not where we want to land in terms of long-term, high-quality online experiences. And in many markets, what we're seeing is this type of a response has been adequate for high-income students, but it's been devastating for low-income students. We've seen learning loss in the neighborhood of 60 to 80% for some segments of the population. So it's still a big issue. This pandemic has not gone away, and it's going to be here for a while. And we need to figure out how do we actually build better long-term, more resilient, more better solutions, if you will, that are going to help us enable not only students going through the crisis that we're going through today, but also long into the future for whatever comes next. The impact that we had on D12s, we certainly saw a major spike up in terms of utilization on the systems. We've absorbed that. So, as you can probably imagine, like the cost attached to serving our clients more than doubled almost overnight. And we've made the decision to just simply absorb it. Now we would appreciate, clients continuing to buy additional things from us is by no means a requirement, but it's trying to figure out ways that we can be a partner through this has been a big piece of the puzzle. We've also made changes with how we implement clients. For example, in the past, when we would implement a new client, it might take 3 or 4 months to stand up a site and get things running and get things integrated. Well, in our case, we implemented 51 different colleges and universities down in South Africa in less than a day. And imagine that rippling all throughout the world. We've been moving very quickly to eliminate a lot of the bottlenecks to helping clients get onboarded. And I'm really proud of what the team's done. It's not been perfect, but we've achieved 99.99% uptime through this. And that comes with a big expense of making sure that everything's well looked after. But I'm also really proud that our net promoter score with our clients is 45.5. And for folks that follow net promoter, which is important for any business, that's just a notch off of where Apple is today, which is a pretty good aspiration for our team. And the 45.5 I love because our team fights for every 0.5. They won't be happy until they get above Apple. And so we're working hard to make sure that folks are well supported throughout the whole journey. And as you can imagine, just like on your teams, it's not been easy for our teams to deal with. In my case, I've got 3 kids at home, but I'm in a pretty fortunate location with grandparents, just north and south of me. But not everyone's in that same situation. So being able to this is one of the things that I really love about our education clients is that we lean in on each other. We help each other. We're mindful and respectful of each other as we go through these types of crises. And I can tell you our clients have been great as we've gone through it. I've been so impressed with how not only have you taken care of your own, but you've helped so many other clients of ours through the community or through Twitter or through other posts, just lending a hand to folks that need that extra support. And it's been very impressive. We also leaned in and we more than increased our developers at D12 by more than 50% right at the beginning of this, hiring up additional people to really accelerate some of our roadmap. So launching things like, the ability to do 30-minute videos versus, 1 minute, just expanding that capacity for free. Or you'll hear about it shortly. It was very clear to us that there were a number of things that were gaps in our system that we needed to go close off. And by the way, there are gaps in any system. None of our competitors have these things. But without these things in place, it made it very hard for our customers to actually really work together to bring that vision of the 2030 forward, and also to work together to solve the problems. So one of those things, and I won't steal too much thunder from Jack for next, for a session there, yes, tomorrow. But one of those is we're about to roll out support for LTI from one client to another client. So I know that's a technical standard, but what does that actually mean? It means, if you're at the University of Waterloo and you want to share an intro chemistry course that has some great labs built into it with the University of Ottawa, you could. And they would log into the University of Ottawa. They would click the course for chemistry, and they would be enrolled just like they would be enrolled in a publisher pack directly into the environment. So, we're doing a lot of things right now, and we're not done with that. There's a whole bunch of work that we're going to do to make that even easier for our clients to share between each other, just to make it a lot easier for us as a collective education sector to help others respond to this crisis. So that's just one example. And then the other one is, I'm really proud that after 18 years of thinking about it, we're now bringing to life a mastery view within the system. So this December, we're launching, building off our outcomes framework, a mastery concept within the gradebook. So you can see the competencies or skills or outcomes, and then be able to see the progress that the student has been demonstrating throughout the course, and be able to assess their progress. So there's a lot of little things and some big things that we've been working on, but really proud of how the team is coming together to try to tackle these challenges. And that leads me to sort of like the bring me back up to the macro level, if you will. What we're trying to do as a country, which, in June, I got tapped on the shoulder to basically lead the digital strategy for Canada through the Industry Strategy Council. So representing the digital sector and then chairing the digital economic strategy table through industry strategy, through the Industry Strategy Council. I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but as a group that's part of HigherEd that is feeding into many different ministries, including the Prime Minister's office. And our mandate that we were given was to look at all the different challenges across the whole of the country and figure out a good plan for how to restart, recover, and reimagine the economy. And so if you can imagine, we've done over 100 consultations, formal consultations, hundreds of CEOs and folks like CICAN, Universities Canada, presidents and CEOs of different airlines, all the way through to all the 9 different sectors that we were representing, which was about a half of the economy. That was hard. That was hard hit, if you will, with the pandemic. And so that work is just coming relatively quickly to a conclusion in terms of the first wave of what we were doing. The report's actually going in shortly. The drafts have already been circulating since July. And we've seen a number of different programs get supported through some of that work already. But as you can imagine, there's no secret that a lot of different sectors have had a hard hit here, right? Whether that's airline transportation or retail or hospitality and tourism. And I think what you'll be surprised at, though, is how much what we've talked about is that future of work and learning is actually coming true today. And I was blown away. Even at the hardest hit sectors are wanting to see a reskilling, upskilling strategy rolled out as quickly as possible as an urgent way for them to navigate this pandemic. So embracing, for example, in retail, digital skills to make sure that they're able to get their transformation done as quickly and as nimbly as possible, and they can optimize on the other side of it. Or, in the oil and gas sector, moving quickly into automation and other types of technologies, which has an impact on jobs, but it enables these companies to survive. There's a lot of work going into trying to map out how do we best do that. And then the numbers that I'm looking at show at least 1 million Canadians that are going to need a reskilling strategy rolled out to get them back on their feet and get them back into the workforce that they want to be in. If you look at the US, this is even a greater number. I think we're looking at about 30 million folks in the US that need to be reskilled to get back into the workforce. These are not small numbers. And I think as an education sector, we should rally around this as an opportunity for us to put our foot forward and adapt our programs, embrace micro, embrace flexible, embrace competency-based learning, embrace prior learning assessment, to do a much better job in helping these folks get back into the workforce in a much faster way. And I'm certainly advocating for us to do things differently than what we do typically through an EI type of retraining program, to make sure that folks have an opportunity to really upskill, really take the time to actually get into a different career path that's actually going to enable them to be very successful, productive members of our economy and of our society. Think more of a college or university experience that's going to really enable them to get ahead. So, big picture, I think we've been pulled 10 years into the future. You could argue it's only been 3 to 5, but I think it's somewhere between that 3 to 10 range. And the sooner that we can start to rally around this, the better. And I also think there's a lot that we can do in terms of embracing change in that reimagine phase as well. So not just supporting the recovery and the restart, but how do we build world-leading companies? How do we build world leaders here within the country to help us get through this economic crisis as well, and bend the economic curve up so that our growth and our GDP will actually be faster than it was anticipated to be, because we're actually making some smart investments right now to actually embrace the change that's underway. And I'll give you one example, and then we're going to break for questions. So feel free to ask questions. I don't know if our team can take you off of the attendees list and into the, the video here, but I'm happy to see you on video or through the chat. But I'll give you, one example of trying to embrace change, reimagine. If you look at digital as part of our economy today, it's around 12% of our economy today. It's digital or digitally transformed enterprises. Well, the numbers that I'm seeing point to within the next 4 years, the majority of the world's economy will be digital or digitally transformed enterprises. We're going to see, and that was data that was pre-pandemic. We're going to see a massive transformation of our economy in the next 2 to 4 years. And we as a sector need to help navigate those waters. So what do we need to do? We need to retain more of our talent that we're graduating. We need to attract more people into our country to help us navigate these challenges. We need to build better research capacity. We need to do so much more to be able to create opportunities here for Canada to create globally leading digital companies, digitally transformed companies that are anchored here in Canada, versus us just simply being consumers of these experiences. And we've got a lot to accomplish over the next short little while. And hopefully I've given you a little bit of a picture in terms of, future of work and learning, D2L and what we're working on, and what some of the challenges are for Canada in terms of how we respond to the crisis that we're in today. And then lastly, I just want to wrap with how we can partner, which is going to open up the Q&A section of this. We certainly have been partnering with a number of universities to help other universities even get online. So an example would be we partner with Athabasca University to help launch Algoma University online, as well as Grand Prairie and others. Just one example of partnering to expand out. We've also helped put thousands of courses online using our Learning and Creative Services group. There's been so much activity in terms of where the humans at D2L have been chipping in and helping our clients get through this transformation. And by the way, humans matter. You'll see that as an underlying theme in all of our white papers. But it's more than that. So there's another big effort that we're working on right now. It's Codename Project Nova, where we've partnered with 4 different universities across Canada already, but that list will grow. And what we're trying to do now is take these high demand skills areas, whether it's in the digital economy or otherwise, and map out the right programming, whether it's micro-credentials or certificates or masters, create a catalog of these things that we can then take out to large companies or to the various different sectors or even government to help drive the enrollment. So in our case, we're looking at trying to close some of the enrollment gaps for some of our clients by now taking a much more active role in helping to drive that enrollment into these types of programs. So if you're at all interested in that, I'd be happy to chat with you about it or introduce you to Nadia Wilson on our teams at D2L who are leading the charge on that. And we're quite excited. That's again, a long-term vision that's, been accelerated during this pandemic, and certainly seeing a good response from the sector in terms of this having a really positive impact on being able to help employers or governments reskill folks or upskill folks in a much more efficient way than trying to do it themselves directly or trying to do ad hoc partnerships. So I promised everyone that I would only speak for a few minutes, but I clearly have gone a little longer than I expected. But at this time, I'd like to really, again, thank you as clients and folks in the education sector for all the work that you've been doing to navigate these waters. And I'd be glad to take some questions there now and have a bit more of a dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, John. We're going to be asking everyone to post your questions in the chat, and we'll be sharing that with John. So don't be shy. I know some of my customers are on there. I won't call you out, but I know you have great questions and suggestions for John. So please feel free to post those in the chat, and Alyssa and I will be sharing those at John, or John can see them as well. He's a great reader. And I was going to say there, we have a question from Aldo at University of Waterloo. And I was also going to offer, if you want to share your questions in French, I can help translate them for John. So John, you talked about the pandemic moving us forward in the next 10 years. In your discussions with institutions, what are you seeing in terms of strategies to sustain this momentum? Thank you, Aldo.
Yeah, although that's a great question, because I know there's not been a lot of new funding to help with the transition either. So it's not even sustaining, it's helping to get through the transition to this new strategy and then seeing it sustain. Well, I actually look at it as the pandemic has really been a catalyst that has accelerated an existing trend. So, and I only say that because, you know, everything that I'm hearing and seeing reinforces the vision that we painted for 2030, just coming true now. And so what are some strategies? I think Universities Canada did a good job in terms of their recommendations to government in terms of providing significant, think multi-billion-dollar investment into trying to drive a transformation. So how do we actually help provide, you know, funding and resources to help the universities and colleges transform to support these new types of programs on the other side? And then I think, you know, what we're trying to do in terms of Project Nova to make it a more optimized experience and more scalable is a good part of the strategy as well too. You know, it's very hard for a university or a college to build hundreds of relationships with employers. You know, unless you're the University of Waterloo. Waterloo does this very well, but there are probably exceptions to the rule always, but it's very hard for a typical university or college to do this. And so if we can build a system that enables employees to discover, you know, really great resources to help them progress in their career, to do the upskilling and reskilling, I think that does build sustainability into the model. I see very much a broken system on the corporate employer side, where folks struggle to support their employees getting the education benefits that they really need. If you look at traditional education benefit programs, only about 3 to 5% get spent. And the more that actually do get spent, what we're finding is the results are more than paid for themselves. So whether that's the example that we have at FedEx or Fidelity or others, what we're seeing is the more people use these education benefits, the higher the retention of their employees. There's so many other different knock-on benefits, if you will, that come from this. So there's a natural sustainability once we make the pivot, once we make the transition to this new strategy, as long as we're optimizing along the way. And so my hope is to help be a partner in that journey. Although if you want to come off, I don't know if you can get Aldo on the video, but happy to have you talk with me about that, or if you have other comments, I'd be happy to discuss it with you too. And for folks, I know we're waiting for more questions. You know, Aldo, what you did at the University of Waterloo to hire up, I think 350 co-ops to help with the digitization of a lot of different activities was incredibly impressive over the summer. And I know you're doing that on the top of having to support students that were already on campus or digital during the summer as well. So not easy work. Theme of our organization is around humans matter. how are we operationalizing that ethos, and especially with students in the pandemic? Well, that's a great question. I think one of the things that we try to do at D2L around the humans matter is we like every industry, there's a lot of things that we're doing that automate. So we've been making implementations. The deployments of our technology now take less than an hour, whereas they used to take weeks in the past of humans actually doing that work. Well, we've tried to, as we're doing the automation, provide an upskilling or reskilling strategy for our people so that they can move into higher order activities, if you will. So helping our clients through change management, or helping our clients with a better adoption strategy, or doing other work, where it's very tough for automation or technology in particular to to replace that responsibility, if you will. And then and then again, our whole company is about trying to make sure that humans reach their full potential through driving the best possible learning experiences. So that's definitely another part of that's part of our company. And then with students have been particularly hard hit during this pandemic. So if you look at the data, it's students as well as new grads, and in that zone of under 30 that have actually been disproportionately impacted by the job losses. And so what I'm doing in particular is working with government to make sure that we put in place programs that support students getting employment opportunity, support students getting those initial starts, if you will, and making that pivot. So, to me, I think that's so critical. So this, the SWIP program is a good example. I'm certainly advocating for that to be renewed and expanded. That started off as a $73 million program. It's now, I think, $1 billion program. So it's not a small initiative in terms of getting students jobs. And so, Benoit, who's at HigherEd, is, a good friend, and we've been working very closely to, address some of those challenges. The work integrated learning, the student comeback challenge is another example, right? So again, I would encourage you to go get the students sign up for that. And there's so many other things that we have to do, as we've talked about. And all
John,
those giving me some affirmation that we're on the right path.
perfect. We also have a question in the Q&A from Tracy with York University. She said, we've been advocating to the federal and provincial government for several years to execute a national skills strategy that includes funding to the public to support courses at accredited institutions, among many other things, like some of the leading countries of the world. Yet so far we have had little valuable. What insights can you share, ideas for joint advocacy?
Well, I think, thanks, Tracy. That's a great question. I think the initial response when I've raised this with government as well, Tracy, was, well, we have a program underneath EI for that. So I, like any engineer, I've been trained well in terms of looking at, well, what's the 5 whys methodology? Well, let me explore that deeper. And so I've gone deeper in terms of the EI strategy for reskilling and upskilling, and it's not sufficient. It's really designed to get people back into the first available job, and not really an upskilling or a reskilling strategy whatsoever. And so the best thing that we can do is provide some research or reports or submissions to government that continue to advocate for it. Now, I'm fortunate. I sit in a position where I've definitely been advocating for it. And, again, anything I'm saying here is pre-decisional. So no firm decision has been made on what I'm saying here, but it has certainly weighed heavily into the recommendations that I've been making that may make it into the final report here within a few days. So I'm optimistic that they understand the problem now fully, the folks that are responsible for it. But there's no issue with continuing to put in submissions on making sure that we provide a better upskilling and reskilling strategy. We've also partnered, as D2L, that's me and my industry strategy council, wearing my industry strategy council hat. And at D2L, we've been working with Universities Canada and college and CICAN, the Business Council of Canada, and, dozens of other industry associations, even unions, to pull together a strategy for launching a sort of a national learning strategy around upskilling and reskilling. And my hope is that gets support as well too. But yeah, that's a different strategy. But I think the only way for us to solve this is to really come together, make sure the case is well heard, and to make sure that government does understand and fund the importance of this.
Perfect. And one more in the question and answer section is Brett Clayton from Durham College. That is D2L collaborating with government, encouraging investment in communication infrastructure and technologies, specifically investing in rural internet service. Many of our faculty and students are profoundly impacted by having to work and study from home.
Brett, you know, there are 5 million Canadians, which is a lot, that don't have broadband today. And so, you know, and CRTC's definition of broadband, I like. It's a good definition of having actually really good high-speed connectivity to each Canadian's home. And we do need to accelerate that connectivity. So to me, it's not just for education, it's also for everything. And anyone in these rural communities that don't have access to high-speed internet are at a severe disadvantage to their counterparts. And so we do need to accelerate it. The challenge, by the way, that has definitely been heard across every consultation that we've done. That one's really well understood. But the challenge is coming up with really good solutions to the problem. Because again, you know, it's not an easy problem to go solve, and I you know, I got to be careful what I share here because some of this was done in confidence. But you know, I think we need creative solutions to how we solve that problem. Whether that's low Earth orbit satellites that blanket Canada with great connectivity, or other types of strategies around 5G, or other types of, you know, broadband initiatives, including community built out infrastructure. Those are all things that are going to be critical for us to push forward. There's a lot of funding already available. It needs to be pushed out the door into these projects. And we need to also submit to government really creative solutions on how to solve this problem. So if you've got creative ideas, please send them to me, john@d2l.com. I'm listening. And while we're on that topic, you know, I do think, you know, as a country, we need to expand our definition of infrastructure. So infrastructure, if you think about it, is much more than just building bridges and roads and railways. You know, other countries have expanded their definition of infrastructure to include AI, quantum, you know, blockchain, other types of technologies. We should be doing similar. There's no question that, you know, we as a country need to put in place an infrastructure strategy that is digital and not just broadband, but way more than just simply broadband. You know, I actually, you know, again, until the report comes out, there's some stuff I just can't share, but I'm very excited to share that report to our client base once it does come out, because there are some strategies there that I really need a lot of support rallying the education community around to support. So, you know, but at the core of it is let's put in place an infrastructure within the country that helps us become global leaders in digital.
Thank you, John. We do have a few minutes. If you have an extra question, last question for John, and I want to thank Aldo, Tracy, and Brett for submitting those. You can submit in the Q&A or in the chat. Any last comments? Yep. Oh, a response from Aldo, John, in the chat.
Yeah. Are we seeing a realization of this across the different institutions, that the remote learning, as it's been coined, as different than online learning? Not really. No, I think there are some folks that have discovered this and have understand the challenge, and then there are some folks that really understand it, and others that are still learning it. So I don't think that's a universal. I wish it was. You know, we have, but we have a lot to do because although like there are clients that are trying to embrace a better way forward, but just simply don't have the capacity to implement it in the time frame. You know, so an example, you know, in Ontario, we rolled out grades 1 through 8, a new curriculum for grades 1 through 8 in math. Well, you know, you actually have to have content to support the 1 through 8 math new curriculum. And oh boy, the way, you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. So how do we actually do that both in the classroom and fully online at the same time? And so it's not been the biggest priority to put together the whole solution. Folks are still in that emergency response mode. So, you know, in my mind, like, you know, what we did early on was we partnered with somebody that had the 1 through 8 math content. It was, you know, world class. So we're now trying to say, okay, well, learning platform plus content plus support for synchronous is a winning combination. Like there's no reason why that's not a really good outcome, provides a really good solution that, you know, that helps student in both a synchronous as well as in a high quality asynchronous mode. You know, not every student has the ability to have a device and participate with everybody in the class synchronously because, you know, they're at home where, you know, maybe every kid in the house is sharing one device. And so it's just not available to them. So there's a big equity issue there. Whereas asynchronous provides that equity. So, you know, some of the kids could be learning in the morning, some of them could be in the afternoon, and you as a teacher know exactly where each student is as they progress through that content. So I do think there's a lot more that we can be doing to come together as a sector to provide not just the technology, but also help with the content and the assessments and the pedagogy and everything else around it. There's way more that needs to be done here. And the worst part is like some of these projects try to get off the ground, but are not successful. And so people revert back to doing it just purely synchronous, which they know doesn't work. Especially I'm thinking in the K-12 sector in the US. And it's really having a negative impact on students. The culture is very risk adverse to trying new things. And we need to break that culture down and try to embrace those new ways of doing learning and try to embrace the good things. And although, you know this, but I thank you for the question. And I do think we have a bigger responsibility to share these ideas and provide a better path forward. We also have to get out of, just narrowly focusing on our own zone, if you will, to help others navigate this pandemic. It's certainly a fog for many people.